How about a warm Mark Thompson show welcome for Spencer Christian?
Hey.
Yeah.
All right. Good to be with
Nobody
you.
was hooking up on Good Morning America when you were there that you knew of?
Not that I knew of, no.
You had Joan London there. She was quite lovely.
She was America's mom. and
Oh, that's right. America's mom.
And Charlie Gibson, a great guy, straight arrow kind of guy.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
David Hartman before that.
David Hartman. Good morning, Spencer. Yeah, David Hartman. Good morning, America. Yeah, that show put you in touch with so many people. Oh. You became friends with Jimmy Carter, I know.
Yeah.
Friends with, apropos of Martin Luther King Day, with Muhammad Ali, who I think took many courageous positions when it came to civil rights.
He certainly did. Came back from the 1960 Olympics after having won a gold medal and found out that in his hometown of Louisville, Kentucky, he wasn't a hero. He still couldn't go into the restaurants, the movie theaters, the bathrooms, the water fountains. Oof.
I mean, that was the weird thing about even coming back from war. I know Tom Brokaw did that book, The Greatest Generation, and I understood why he called it The Greatest Generation. It was a generation of immense sacrifice.
Yeah.
And they did beat back fascism, and the world would have looked like a much different place had they not been around the way they were. Yeah. But America was broken, and they came back to insane segregation and racism.
That's right. I mean, they were truly a great generation, but I wish many of those returning white soldiers had taken a public stand on behalf of my father and his brothers who fought in the same war and came back home to segregation. They weren't welcome. They couldn't get GI loans. They still couldn't send their kids to the schools of their choice or compete for jobs for another 20 years. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. I'll get to the weather in a minute, but I'm glad we started with this. I feel as though you, Spencer Christian, and I read your book, and we've had conversations around your childhood in the Jim Crow South.
Yeah,
you are well positioned to talk about America and how we've evolved since then. This ridiculous manifestation of racism that existed, as I say, in your childhood, and then you saw the country transform itself in many ways.
Oh, yeah.
Through in the 15 years, let's say through the 60s, through about 1970, I'd say.
Yeah.
As the civil rights movement exploded and did produce serious change.
Oh, it really did. I mean, no doubt about it. So in the mid to late 60s, starting with 64, the Civil Rights Bill, and then the Voting Rights Act of 65, and all the things all the legislation and policies that followed from the late 60s into the early 70s that got rid of that system of legalized state-sponsored segregation and discrimination. And you saw the proud, vocal racists like George Wallace and Lester Maddox disappearing from the public scene. And even though a lot of that was replaced by polished politicians like Ronald Reagan, who used dog whistles, buzzwords that said to the bigots, it's okay, we understand how you feel, but let's go along with this new program. That was sort of okay. And then you had Southern governors like Jimmy Carter, who stood up against the Klan and supported desegregation. And then even more progressive Southern governors like Bill Clinton, and all of a sudden I thought the South was really, moving into the 20th century. It was 20th at that time. And now here we are with, a huge number of elected public officials who aren't using dog whistles. They're using bullhorns, to express their racist views and enforce racist policies, like Governor DeSantis in Florida with his unabashed approach to voter suppression.
Yeah, voter suppression. I'd suggest it exists, of course, through Florida. It exists in Georgia, in Texas. They've made it a high art. Taking away the vote from minority communities is something that is being done openly and aggressively in so many of these states. The other thing that I find troubling is the way in which we've been slow to educate. That whole thing about what was it, Kim? It called the
Call it CRT.
yeah, right. Critical race
Critical
theory,
race
right.
theory.
Thank you. Right.
Yeah.
Being
So the
taught anywhere.
it's not being taught anywhere.
Huh?
But B, I don't really. I mean, I've read a lot about it, but I haven't sat through or looked through the syllabus and the actual, lesson plan for what CRT even would be, were it being taught anywhere. But it's become this talking point, and as you say, it's then dog whistle-y adjacent, or not even a dog whistle, as you say. It might be megaphone adjacent. The other thing is, how come we're not teaching it? It's real.
Right.
The underpinnings of racism do inform every part of life in America. You don't have to make it the only thing you teach, but I don't understand why it's become this radioactive thing you can't talk about. Oh, critical race theory. We're not even teaching it anywhere. Don't worry. You can still, because is white America still so pearl clutchy? We're worried about losing our country to the minorities.
And we're worried about losing control. And from a mom's perspective about what's being taught in school, it's interesting because you still hear on Columbus Day, they'll come home with, make a picture of a boat or what have you. But the older kid who is learning in school the way things really went down will turn around and tell the younger one, that's not right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Tell you the truth. Let me tell you the truth. And for me, that's what critical race theory is. It's just, let's get away from the legend and let's actually get down to the nitty gritty and say, here's how it went down.
That's right. That's absolutely right. And when it comes to teaching about race and racism in America, it's not even about erasing a legend. I mean, it's right. We were all taught in school that slavery was a thing. It actually happened, and we know that Jim Crow was a thing. I lived through it. And we know that in my lifetime, but certainly back in my parents' youth, back in the 1930s and 40s, in lots of southern towns, lynchings were conducted in a public square on Sunday afternoons after church. This actually happened. So how can you erase that from our history and not teach about race and race relations in America as a way of helping young people understand why we are where we are?
Sure. And it's not as though you're saying you, the white kid, are responsible for this. You weren't even alive for this.
Right.
But don't you think you should know that you had to put on a coat and tie to go watch a black person get lynched? Yeah. I mean, and by the way, I'm not saying that you teach it to second graders either, but I'm simply saying that dry cleaning our history of this stuff is a huge mistake. Are you going to teach history or not? Are you going to teach American history for real, or is this all just performative? So I'm troubled by where we are now on that, and it seems as though we've backslid quite a bit.
How is it that Germany and Germans are more willing to embrace the ugly part of their history, Nazism and fascism, than we Americans are to embrace the ugliness of our history? I don't get it.
Yeah.
I mean, not embrace, but acknowledge,
Of course. No, I get what you're saying. Embrace the notion of teaching it. And the other thing is that even when it comes to the Holocaust, we don't really step up. I mean, it's amazing. You've got Holocaust deniers here more than you do in Germany because we don't really teach. We tiptoe around it. It's ugly. I get it. Yeah. But history is filled with ugliness.
It is.
Anyway, and the other thing, last thing I would say, just in general, if you want to avoid these wars, you have to know what war really is. War isn't a thing that you play with a video game. War is a big, ugly mess. And innocent people die, and I think that's another thing. So I would suggest that our educational system has to step up in many ways, and that racism and America's thread of racism, which sadly runs through so much, has just been one more casualty of this desire to kind of, frankly, steamroll what really happened.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Just until a couple of years ago, I didn't know what happened in Texas, that they didn't get the word that slavery had been abolished. No one ever taught that to me in school. Yeah. That's the kind of thing I guess when you control the story, you control society or whatever the reason is for not teaching the truth.
Yeah.
But it makes me angry that I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I feel like we have a responsibility to make sure that people know the truth.
Well, Kim, listen to this. Talking about that, the holiday is called Juneteenth, right?
Yeah,
Recognizing that, yeah, that the enslaved people in Texas weren't informed until 2 years after
right.
slavery had officially ended. I didn't know that growing up either. And I went to an all-black school in the old segregated South, and we were taught history. It wasn't until I think I was either, and I heard some of the old people I knew, like grandparents' age, talking about Juneteenth, but I never learned what that was in school till I was a senior in high school, right, getting ready to go to college. And this is 1965, and all of a sudden, I found out what Juneteenth was all about.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not surprised that
Right.
you weren't taught it either.
Here I am, middle aged, and not really realizing it until Juneteenth becomes a big deal in the news, and I'm thinking, "What's that?" And
Yeah.
then you look back and you think, "Well, how was that allowed to happen?" Same thing. It just frustrates me to no end when I think that there were businesses in your lifetime that you couldn't go into, and
Yeah.
how was that ever okay?
Yeah.
This from the chat: isn't CRT more than just teaching history? Yeah, CRT is more than what sort of stuff about social justice. I see. Oh, it's about social. Here it is. I teach upper elementary and middle school, says Lori. CRT is not a
Not a
thing. We teach
Right.
history.
Right.
Some teachers like me add stuff about social justice. Yeah. What I would say about CRT being more than teaching history, and again, the CRT thing, I think it becomes a talking point. And sorry to say, Randy, I don't think you're this guy because I read your emails and read your comments. But it does become, you got to be careful. It really does become a talking point for a code about racism.
Yeah.
It speaks to what is the texture of America and how it's informed from a business standpoint and from a cultural standpoint by racism that's been ingrained in the culture, in cultural and even judicial institutions. And so that's a broad stroke at it, but that's my basic understanding. I don't see why that's a bad thing.
No, it's not. And we can be a great nation and still acknowledge that, we're not 100% pure, that we've done some awful things as a nation. In fact, if we were to acknowledge that and accept it and talk about it, it would be a greater nation.
Sure. I mean, all right. We can move. I love this conversation, and I love that Spencer's a regular visitor to our show. It's one of the good things that this brutal winter has brought us as a visit with Spencer Christian, so we can get into some of this stuff. You're such a bright guy, and I feel, this is my frustration when I was a weather forecaster and on television every night. I felt like, gosh, I feel like my world is being limited now to just, barometric pressure. and you have so much more there. That's why I love your book, and I just love the richness of our conversations. Is really something special. So that's what this winter has brought us. So I want to ask you about what's happened over the weekend now, weather-wise, because there's so many incidents of floods, of slides, but our fears for Monterey, for example, apparently. I'm looking at the latest, and they're sort of now backburnering all of their concerns about Monterey County.
I don't know the latest on that, except when we talked last week, there was talk about Monterey becoming an island because of yeah. So what's the latest now? Are the floodwaters beginning to recede?
Yeah,
Is that right? That's what it said, Kim,
Salinas Creek was receding a bit. There was some flooding, though. There was some roads damaged and some homes damaged. As a matter of fact, they're saying that in Monterey County, they're putting the damage estimates, let's see, $30 million to public infrastructure in Monterey County.
Yeah.
Well, the damage, sorry, I was just going to say the damage done from a financial standpoint, a fiscal standpoint, is greater, they say, from these storms than even the wildfires over the last couple of years. So that if you're just concerned with dollars and cents, I mean, if you just look at dollars and cents, not that you'd just be concerned with it, but I'm just thinking if you just concern yourself for a moment with that, that's how bad it is.
Well,
go ahead, Scott.
If there's any good news to report about the recent weather events, it is that last night's storm is probably the last of the significant storms we're going to see for a while. So it obviously has ended for today. Tomorrow it's supposed to be sunny. It'll start drying out a little bit. A little weak system is going to come through late Wednesday into Thursday. That'll bring some light rainfall, but I doubt it'll be enough to add to the flooding problems. And then from late Thursday through the weekend, we expect sunny days and some more drying out. But of course, we're left with all the, probably hundreds of millions of dollars of damage area wide, with houses damaged and trees down and mudslides and road closures and road repairs needed. And there's been loss of life. I mean, this has just been a terrible period of stormy weather. And it's going to take a long time to recover, so to speak.
Yeah, and the last thing I would say, Spencer, I think you'd agree with me, when it comes to the drought, two things are true. First of all, a lot of this water, the snowpack is spectacular, of course.
Oh, yeah.
The water is here in the quantities that Spencer's just talking about, and it does replenish groundwater supplies, et cetera. But a tremendous amount of water flows out to the ocean in California, and so we don't capture that the way ideally we should. But here's the bigger thing about the drought: the West is more than just California, and the West is in the grips of a mega drought. Yep. And these storms, while relieving some of our concerns in California, do not address the kind of mega drought we're dealing with in the West. Yeah,
that's true. I mean, from the Rockies to the coast, that's a whole lot of West right there. And, we're getting some relief right now. And perhaps, Washington State and Oregon will get some relief. But, boy, you move away from the coast, and as you pointed out, it's still severe, worse than severe. I use severe as a regular conversation word. Right. In terms of ranking drought, severe is okay. But there's a lot of exceptional and what's the other? Extreme drought in the West. And that's not going to be remedied by these recent rainfalls.
That's right.
Can I show you guys some weather pictures? I like to show weather pictures while Spencer's here.
Yeah.
Over the weekend, they're both Golden Gate Bridge related. We had this accident on the Golden Gate Bridge where a semi-truck overturned in the downpouring rain, shut down traffic for 2 hours, I believe, on the Golden Gate. Yeah. So there was that one. And I also wanted to show you a video. This is from the National Weather Service, and it is kind of hard to make out, but you can see the lightning. It's hitting one of the towers of the Golden Gate Bridge over the weekend.
Wow.
You can see the tower kind of in the distance there.
That's not fake. That's real.
Yeah, right.
That's right.
That's nasty.
And did you guys see the video over the weekend? I think it was from Soquel, of that portion of highway that just slid down the hillside. Mm-hmm. It was not a freeway, but it was a major roadway. And because the ground was so saturated, you could see first in the video, you could see this crack, this big crevice in the highway. Then all of a sudden you could see the huge portion of the highway slowly shifting and then right downhill. So scary stuff.
And you made the point in our last 30 seconds with Spencer Christian. You made the point, I thought it was such a good one, that after the rain stops, there can still be soil movement. There still will be soil movement. There still will be slides. Yeah. So this is a tricky period regardless of whether it is raining or has stopped raining.
That's right. And the threat of those sludge will be with us for probably weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, or longer. And so just be prepared for more of this. Be careful. Don't spend a lot of time around these hillside areas right now until we kind of feel that everything is stabilized.
Spencer, love talking to you. Thank you so much for your thoughts and reflections on where we are this Martin Luther King Jr. Day.
Yes.
And we'll look forward to talking to you later this week. Thank you, my friend. Spencer Christian, everybody. Yeah.